This is a quick tutorial to help you with your sentence breakdown activity. Please refer back to this as needed to fill out your successive sheets. It is best to have the sheet that we are going to use in front of you so you can complete it as you watch the video. The first step is to read the sentence. In this case, we have Herman Melville referred to the omniscient gods oblivious of suffering man. Our first step with a sentence is on the first line to identify the parts of speech. We will use abbreviations. N for noun, and even though this is a proper noun, we will identify both parts separately. For verbs, we will use a V. For the preposition, we will use P-R-E-P, the as an adjective, A-D-J. Omniscient is also an adjective. Gods is a noun. Oblivious is an adjective. Of is a preposition. Suffering, an adjective that modifies man, which is also a noun. We have now identified the parts of speech. On the next line, we will identify the parts of a sentence. So we are looking specifically for our essential elements: subject, predicate, direct object, indirect object, predicate adjective, predicate nominative. In this case, we will identify Herman Melville as the subject by using a dotted line, the abbreviation SUBJ, and again dotted lines to show where it begins and ends. The predicate is referred, and because it is an action verb, we will identify it as A for action, V for verb, P for predicate. There are no other essential elements in this sentence. The third line will be used to identify any types of phrases. These can include prepositional phrases, infinitive phrases, participial phrases, and gerund phrases. In our case, we have two phrases. The first, and again we will use dotted lines, to the omniscient gods. Notice prepositional phrases start with a preposition and typically end with the object of the preposition, which is a noun or pronoun. And our second one, and the second one, which begins with of and ends with man. The last line will be used to identify clauses. Specifically, we need to look for subject and verb pairings and whether or not those subject and verb pairings can stand alone. In this case, we have one subject and one action verb predicate, so therefore we have only one subject, one verb, one clause. Again, using our dotted lines, we will identify this as one independent clause. The last thing on this list that we need to do is identify the sentence type. Because it is simply one independent clause, we will identify it as a simple sentence, but also a declarative sentence. For the grammar portion, we are going to talk about what specifically is important about this sentence grammatically. The most interesting part of this sentence is the fact that gods, the noun, has a modifying adjective before it and after it. Typically in the English language, we use our modifiers before the noun. So we will identify that under grammar. The last interesting thing grammatically about this sentence is the use of the word suffering. Suffer is typically a verb, but in this case, the ing ending creates it as a participle, which is now an adjective modifying man. When we look at vocabulary, you will always notice that there is a specific word that is bolded in the sentence. In this case, it is the word omniscient. Under vocabulary, you should define that word and then explain its significance to the sentence. The adjective omniscient means all-knowing, coming from omni, which means all, and psi, which means know. The second interesting aspect of vocabulary when it comes to the word omniscient is that when omniscient works to describe the gods, that's a common use. God is all-knowing. However, the pairing of the second adjective, oblivious, becomes even more significant. Oblivious means not knowing. So in this case, we have two words describing gods that mean the opposite: omniscient, all-knowing, and oblivious, which means not knowing. The next area of interest is poetics. With poetics, we're starting to look at words and phrases as we would a poem. We're looking for sound or musical devices like onomatopoeia, alliteration, assonance, consonants that show the sounds of words and how they affect our interpretation. In this case, we have two interesting aspects of the O's: omniscient, gods, with the same vowel sound. This is called assonance. So we can list those two words that are working together. In fact, I'm going to highlight them in my notes as a reminder of what I found. The second repetition of sound that I found very interesting was from the S sounds: omniscient, gods, oblivious, and suffering. Now, if these S sounds came only from the first sound in the word, we would call it alliteration. But because it comes from different areas of different words, we refer to it as consonants. And again, I'm going to go back and highlight those just as a reminder to myself of the sound they make. Now, we identified the sound, but we should still ask ourselves what that does for us. And in this case, the repetition holds these words together. All right, one more to go. Writing is going to deal with what we see from the text itself. And what we see here is the use of an embedded quote. This is the only portion that is actually being quoted at this point. Who said this? Herman Melville did. Notice the use of appropriate quotations to show that these are someone else's words. So the writer of this sentence is identifying that she is not using her own words for this portion and is attributing it to the correct author, Herman Melville. So in the writing portion, we will say, when we quote from a text, we weave it naturally into the sentence. Notice, no punctuation here to divide. It is punctuated as though it is all one natural sentence. The only punctuation added were the quotation marks to identify it is another person's words. It's very important when you complete these sheets to allow yourself to make guesses and be okay with being wrong. Each sentence that we will complete in class will become more challenging than the last, but you really need to open yourself up and be willing to try and be wrong. Because when you do that, it will make you more willing to try, and eventually you'll be right.